Okay.
Okay.
So our next speaker is Piergiorgio Odifreddi. Will share with us, to use his own words, some reminiscences of his past collaboration with Claudio. So please, Piergiorgio, you can start.
Well, first of all, I think, first of all, can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Very good. And of course, I will just share some of the public reminiscences, because we have many private ones, but of course, you know, these we'll have to wait for for the obituary when the time comes, right? So, but jokes apart, you know, first of all, I'm very glad to be here. And I will just speak of Claudio Bartocci, first of all, as a friend, and then as an expositor. I don't know if other people will actually also cover this side of his activity, but I'm going to concentrate on that for a simple reason, because he's a real mathematician and I'm a logician, and you know that logicians are usually considered second-rate mathematicians. And indeed, to tell you the truth, you know, I don't even know exactly what Claudio does in his real life, namely in his research and his real publications. But I know a lot, or at least, you know, I know something of what he did in the other field that, so to speak, intersects with what I do in my public life too, namely exposition of mathematics. I try to remember before coming here, before connecting to the conference, when was the first time that I met Claudio? And I have to confess, I don't remember the first meeting. Sometimes, you know, there are those meetings that, for some reasons, stick to your memory. And I don't remember exactly, but also because I'm quite old. I'm 12 years older than he is. I'm 72 now, and he's 60, obviously. and this is what we're actually celebrating all together. And it's been at least, it's certainly more than 20 years that I've known Claudio. And I have to say that at the very beginning, I was very envious of him. For a simple reason, for many years, for 50 years of my life, I just studied and did research in mathematical logic. And then all of a sudden, when I almost turned 50, I decided to write a book, which was, in a certain sense, expository. It was called The Gospel According to Science. I actually obviously presented the book to the manuscript to a publishing house, which was Einaudi, through a friend that also Claudio knows very well, Ernesto Ferrero. And then I didn't hear anything from them for around a year or even more, perhaps 18 months. And I thought that probably, you know, the book was not of their liking and would probably not be published. But then all of a sudden, I was summoned to the Einaudi publishing house, and Corso Biancamano, via Biancamano in Torino. And I think that in one of those occasions when we were working on the proofs of the book, one of the days Claudio Bartocci showed up. And at the time, of course, you know, I didn't know him, also because, as I said already, I hinted at already, he does in mathematics very different things from what I'm used to. So I didn't know his name. But then very easily we became friends. And the reason of my envy was that I discovered that, of course, I knew that the meetings, the famous Wednesday meetings, which I think happened every other week, so twice a month. These were something mythical in the history of Einaudi. You have to realize, for those of you who don't know the name, or maybe for the foreigners, Einaudi is, and especially at those times, was one of the leading cultural publishing houses in Italy. It had a very long and famous history because of writers like Italo Calvino, on Cesare Pavese and people like that, Primo Levi. I mean, they all worked with Einaudi. And not only they worked, but they got together every other week to talk about literature, to discuss projects for the publishing house, to read manuscripts, to propose manuscripts of others, and so on. And of course, I was reading about these things in the newspapers, but those were things very far away from my world in mathematics. And I always dreamed that at least once in my life, I would be invited to one of those meetings. It never happened till today, right? Despite the fact that after that book, The Gospel According to Science, I think I published 2 or 3 other books with Einaudi. So in a sense, I was an author of Einaudi, but this was not a sufficiently close circle. The authors, I mean, there are many authors, many people write books and so on, but the inner circle of Einaudi was something that I could never get a grip of. And I probably knew a few other people that actually took part in those meetings, but Claudio is the only one whom I think I knew in a closer manner. So that's the first thing, and I don't know if the meetings still exist, if Claudio and other people still take part in them. After a while, I changed. No, so after a while,
anymore.
They don't exist anymore, right? So they just became part of history, right?
Another hint of the fact that I'm old.
Yes, that's right. And so that's too bad, because if they still existed, there would still be a chance, a hope of being invited once, in your lifetime. And instead, I just realized, that this is gone, and I will never be part of that inner circle. But it's not just a joke to say that I envied him, because you might imagine, being in touch with a number of intellectuals, especially in our times when we all live how would you say, very individual lives. It's difficult to meet people. We mostly communicate by email and so on, and we really miss the possibility of having personal encounters with people that perhaps belong to completely different fields from yours, from your own. And I think that there were not only literary critics, but also people interested in law, rights, so on, jurists, and writers, etc. So that's a pity. Of course, what do you do when you're not invited to the Santa Santorum of the cultural life of your town? Well, you decide that you can actually invent yourself a sort of meetings. So I started getting together a small circle of intellectuals in Torino, and these things actually, took place in the university in Via Po, which is one of the famous streets in Torino, where once there was the original site of the Torino University, and now it's mostly monuments or administrative places. But eventually, I was invited by the mayor of Rome, Walter Veltroni, and this is always what happens. I lived in Torino, and I get invited from somebody in Rome, not from the people in Torino. And Veltroni invited me to organize a festival of mathematics. Of course, in that case, I became the object and not the subject of envy, because all the Roman mathematicians started saying, why somebody from Torino, why not we from Rome, and so on. But it doesn't matter, and especially because I was not from Rome, then I decided that when I had to invite people to take part in these meetings, well, I would invite people that I knew and not people that I should have invited. And the meetings were very successful, and part of the success was also due to Claudio, which at the time, the meetings started in 2007, and they were held 3 years. Because of course, it's always difficult to do these things, and there are character problems, money problems, a lot of problems of every kind. So there were only 3 festivals of mathematics. And of course, Claudio was invited to take part in them. And I cannot tell, all the details of the 3 meetings, but I think that the best time that we had together related to the congresses of the festivals of mathematics were in New York. I think you remember that famous time, because the meeting was, it started as a big thing, but it became bigger and bigger as the years went by. The last year, in 2009, I think we had 8 Nobel Prize winners, and I think 5 Fields medalists or something like this. It was a giant thing. And so the auditorium in Rome decided that we had become international, and we should have a preview of the meeting of the festival in New York. So we all went together, and Claudio probably remembers that very well. And for example, I remember once when we sat on the stage with Brian Greene, and the 2 of us interviewed Brian Greene. Claudio, of course, is an expert of mathematical physics, and I'm more on the philosophical and logical side. So it was, a double attack, so to speak, to this great thinker. And especially at the time, Brian Greene was at the height of his fame, because he had published one book, which was, what was the name of the universe? The Elegant Universe, which was an immense success. I think he sold millions of copies. And so it was very nice, to be able to discuss with him in public. I remember at that meeting, John Nash was present. He was also present at the 3 meetings in Rome, but he was present there. And the meeting took place in an environment that both Claudio and I actually took advantage of in those years, because it was the Institute for the the Italian Institute of Culture for Advanced Studies, something with a big name. But it was also a very interesting thing, because it was the place where all people like us, namely researchers, professors, intellectuals, and so on, all people like us dream to be invited at, because you go there and they give you a stipend, a salary, and you don't have to do anything. Except for one thing, which is not a very heavy duty, and the only obligation you have at the Institute, the Italian Academy, is to eat lunch once a week. Of course, you eat lunch every day, right? But once a week, you are obliged to eat the lunch together with the other fellows. And this was a sort of environment like the one I was hinting at before, namely the fact that you meet people from very different fields. Practically, there was no scientist. For what I remember, I was the only mathematician at the time. So I was invited once for a semester. And of course, I liked it very much. And I decided then that Claudio also should have his turn, right? So I suggested to him, why don't you make an application application, right? I explained to him what you actually gain from that, and he actually succeeded. A couple of years, I think, after I went. I forgot whether you stayed there for 6 months or for a year.
6 months.
6 months, and it was a beautiful time. I think that also for you, independently from me, because we could actually enjoy the city. We could enjoy the company of the other fellows, meet a number of people, and not only, do a lot of work. When I was at the Italian Academy in New York, I wrote my most successful book, which is called Why We Cannot Be Christians and Let Alone Catholics. Of course, as you might imagine, it's not a book in mathematics. It's a book on the connection between, or the lack of connection between science and religion. And I remember that the friends in there at the time were kind of puzzled, because they would come to my office and they would see me always reading the Bible, and they thought, George maybe, got into trouble, is experiencing a mystical period, right? And I told them, no, don't worry, I'm just reading the Bible because I'm commenting it, actually criticizing it, and so on. And here I could say something related to that, because my books of criticism to religion actually brought me to write other books after that. And they brought me to write 2 books with the Pope Emeritus, Benedict XVI. And these are practically the only books that I wrote with somebody else. All the other books that I wrote are just single author, right, so to speak. So very few books that I wrote with somebody else, but 2 with the Pope, 4 with Claudio Bertocci, of course. So you might deduce from this, the importance of Claudio, by comparison. This is one of them. It's as you see, it's called Pi, but it was actually called a grande opera, a magnus opus in mathematics. And this is a book in 4 volumes that we did together. I always say we did together, but I should specify what this actually really means, because originally it was true that Einaudi, through his connections, proposed to us, to the 2 of us, to actually edit this book. And for a few weeks or months, perhaps, we actually worked together, Claudio and I. We first of all set up a scientific committee, which was a stellar committee. I forgot exactly which people were in there, but it was Freeman Dyson, Sir Michael Atiyah, Alain Cohn, so the best of the mathematics at the time. I think also Whitting. I forgot whether Whitting was one of the Manning, and so on. So it was a wonderful thing. But then, of course, these things are called magnus opus for a reason. They need a lot of work. And I have to confess that at a certain time, I, first of all, little time to devote myself to this project. And also, it was not a question of interest, but it was a question of capabilities, because the 4 volumes are of course very different. There was a volume of connections between mathematics and the humanities, so to speak, and in that one I could give some contributions. I knew because of the festival in Rome, many different people, starting for example from Umberto Eco, whom I had invited in Rome for one of the meetings, and who contributed an essay on numerology, so to speak, and which was actually extracted, an expansion of his talk at the festival, and which became the preface of to one of the volumes. So for the connections between mathematics and the humanities, I could give some help and suggesting some of the contributors. And then there were the 3 more mathematical volumes, and in there I have to say that that Claudio did practically all the work. Namely, first of all, we discussed together, but many of the names that contributed to the volumes, I didn't even know beforehand. So he actually was able to invite them, to persuade them to contribute. And then he did something that has my greatest admiration. Namely, and you correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, he actually read and proofread, which means reading at least twice, right? All the contributions to all the volumes. And I don't know if you're the only one who actually read the 4 volumes all together, right? There's a famous story, you remember, being a logician, it's part of my background, namely when Russell and Whitehead published the 3 volumes of Principia Mathematica. Also, their work was supposed to be 4 volumes, but Russell and Whitehead were not as good as Bartocci and I, right? So they just published 3 volumes. But the story went in the logical circles that nobody had ever read Principia Mathematica completely, nobody, including the 2 authors, because each author actually read, their own parts, but not the other person part. And here, there's a work which is even grander, than Principia Mathematica, at least in, well, I think not only in size, but also as a project, right? And Claudio actually read it, proofread it, organized it, And I remember once, you probably remember when we went, I don't know if it was to present this book or for some other reason to the Mantova Festival, the Festival of Literature, and the 2 of us were there. I think it was to present this,
Yes.
because he started the presentation, turning to me, and saying, George, you realize, that if, and of course, it's an hypothetical statement, right? If we will ever be remembered, in years from now, it would be because of this book. And of course, I felt pretty bad because I had written many books on my own, right? And also, well, it's always okay. It's always okay to be remembered for some reason, But at least I personally knew, that actually, if for any reason the 2 of us would be remembered for this, it's actually him who deserves to be remembered, and the other person, was there, just for, just at the beginning. But of course, Claudio has done a lot of work of his own in exposition. He has if I can say, a defect, which he can share with other people. For example, Adolf Hitler, in the sense, that the great defect, the great mistake that Hitler did during the war, luckily for us, right, was to open too many fronts. If you open too many fronts, then it's difficult to play and fight on each of them, right? And I think that Claudio has so many interests and so many projects. He said is a kind of volcano, right? And so he has many projects, and sometimes, maybe for weeks or months we don't meet, and then I say, what are you doing, and maybe he tells me, I'm writing the book on the point, the point in the sense of the geometrical point, and sometimes again, or still, right? But then, in the meantime, other works, of course, are finished, and he published many. This is another envy that he raised in me. This work, which is not a work of his, of course. It's in this case he's an editor, right? But he put together, as the title says, mathematical stories. It's a wonderful anthology of literary works by great writers, from Lem, for example, to many other people that in some way are connected to mathematics. this is something that I always dreamt of doing it. And of course, I have in my drawer lots of sheets of papers, with notes and everything. But he came first, right? He arrived first, and it's difficult to publish a volume which has the same title, right? And perhaps many also of the same work. So I think that you will also be remembered, on your own, because of this, which is a book that has little to do with technical mathematics, but is a work that indeed, has circulated a lot, that has taught many people from the humanities, many humanists, that mathematics has something to say also in their own works. I think is important. And it's always talking about envies, so it's difficult to, to detach from the capital sins, You see, this is one of the editions of Einaudi, one of the best ones with the hardcover. I published 4 books with Einaudi, always in paperback and never in hardcover. So again, I'm very dissatisfied. And perhaps I talk too much about the things that I organized in exposition, namely the festivals and so on, But I would like to just give you a hint on this, which is an exhibition of, I think it was done with Civaleri. So there are 2 curators or editors, right? Luigi Civaleri and Bartocci. As you see, even if you don't know Italian, the title is self-explanatory, namely numbers. But this was a very interesting exhibition. I think it started with an idea of doing an art exhibition of paintings and works of art that had something to do with mathematics, arithmetic, and geometry. But then it became something much grandiose, because it became a sort of an exhibition on mathematics itself. So there is a history of mathematics, there is works of art, and so on. And I think it's a positive thing that the catalog of the exhibition actually became a book by Codice Editori, which is another of the publishers with whom Claudio has worked a lot. Also because the CEO of Einaudi at the time when we met was Vittorio Bo, then lately and later on started his own publishing house, which is called Codice. So perhaps some of you, or perhaps also many of you, don't know this book. You can find it on Amazon, and I strongly suggest you to read it. It's full. I don't know if I can do these things, because with videos, but as you can see, it's full of paintings and pictures and so on. It's an illustrated book, and it's something, again, another reason for Claudio to be remembered in the future. He gave me only one chance, but as you see, I give him, more than one chance to be remembered in the future. This is a book that he actually did together with other people, and I quoted not so. It's about zero, of course. As you can see, it's called zerology, namely it talks about zero. And the reason I quoted is because I know very well the lady that actually organizes the series of these books, Alessia Graziano. And I had from her, I don't know how many telephone calls, because of course, Claudio, as you know him personally, can be quite intimidating, because he's so ebullient, and so sarcastic too, So this poor lady, was kind of shy, and so he would calling me, and says, could you please call Claudio, and ask him whether he finished this chapter, because the other two authors finished the chapter. At the beginning, it was a month ago. Then a little lady was 6 months ago. Then it was last year, and so on. And so I always, I went, as a go-between, between the publishing house which is another very famous publishing house, namely Mulino, again, very prestigious and so on. But eventually, between Mrs. Graziano and myself, probably Claudio was fed up, in getting calls begging him to finish the contribution. So this was also published. And lastly, because I see that I have just a few minutes left, this is one very interesting book by Claudio, an expository book, which is called To Prove the Impossible, right? And it's a very typical example of the interconnection of all the activities that he does, because there is mathematics, of course, there is history of mathematics, there is philosophy of science, and so on. These are not easy books to read, I have to confess, because expository books, in principle at least, should be things that sometimes, are devoted and thought of for the general public. I think that this is mostly for historians of mathematics and philosophers of mathematics, a very dense book. And again, this is gives me the choice of talking about Cortina Editore, which is an interesting scientific editor in publisher in Italy. And I think that you also have another project with Cortina in your drawer. So you see, how many of these activities Claudio can actually, or you could say how many games he can play on different boards, at the same time. And I really admire him for this. I have to finish by saying another. I don't know if I envy him for this, because it's a quantitative thing as opposed to the qualitative sides that I talked about until now. Namely, I think that Claudio is the person that has read the most books that I know. It might just depend on the fact that I don't know strong readers, but I don't think so. I know a lot of people who read a lot of books, and obviously, I don't know if your wife has the same attitude towards you that my wife has. I think I'm a strong reader, but nothing in comparison to Claudio. But my wife, when she sees me, finishing a book and immediately starting another one, she always quotes Talleyrand, and she tells me, "You read too much for your intelligence, George." I don't know if your wife is so nasty with you, or whether she supports you. But I think that this is also a very interesting side of you. Every time maybe I discover a book, and I talk with him, he has already read it. He has already written a review or an essay on the book, and of course, he has read also all the other works that the same author has written, and. I remember once when I don't know if you remember, a few ladies came once to Torino. They were the organizers. They were working in a library in Modena. And we were supposed to go to dinner, but for some reason that day, Claudio was also in Torino. So I asked him, would you like to join us for dinner? And he came, of course, right? And of course, he ordered, the most expensive wine, as he always does, right? And you might understand, that I'm a teetotaler. So to go to dinner with Claudio, when he drinks the most expensive wine, and I drink only water, is always a bit embarrassing. But that night, they said, we come from the Biblioteca Delfini in Modena. That was the end of it. Because of course, I knew that they came from the Biblioteca Delfini. I didn't know what Delfini meant. Of course, he not only knew about this guy Delfini, but he had read all the books that he had written, right? And this was a biblioteca, a library in Modena. And I'm sure, that if it had been a library somewhere else, it would have been the same thing. So this is just to say, that I really admire Claudio. I admire his culture. I admire his versatility, the possibility of jumping from one field to the other, and I'm really glad and honored that we've been friends for so long, for more than 20 years, that we have written four volumes, or at least we have our names, both names on 4 volumes together, which is a great thing. And I wish you, of course, I won't be here when you turn 100, right? But it would be very interesting, to know what people will have to say of what you will able to do in the remaining 40 years or more that you have in front of you. So my best wishes, happy birthday. And another envy, of course, that I have is that you turn 60, you have a conference in your honor. I never had anything like this, and I didn't have it for 70 because I'm 72 now, So you see, I'm really envious of you, but in a friendly way and not in a nasty way. So a kiss, a friendly kiss to you, and best work to you all in the technical conference. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Piergiorgio. Thank you very much. Thank you for your words, for your kiss that I accept. And
of course, I will give you. I will give it to you.
Thank you for your patience in all these long years, and of course for your friendship. And I think that many times friendships are based on this, on the fact of being envious, each one of the other one. It's kind of, there is always this mixed feelings, so to say. And of course, I have to thank you for the wonderful adventure of the 4 volume of mathematics. It's not true that your role is not important. You did a great job in, say, injecting your energy and your passion in this project. And of course, thank you also for the adventure in New York and for the fellowship at the Italian Academy that is due also to your recommendation letter, I remember. And I have many things I should thank you for let's just say for the opportunities, for example, of meeting many people, from John Nash to Glacio, many others. So I think that we can do many other things together, and perhaps also a couple of books. Why not?
That's right. This time it will be 8 volumes.
8 volumes.
And I will read them all.
By the way, I read the 4 volume 3 times, cover to cover.
So it would have to be 12 volumes in that case. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Bye then. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
Okay, so we can stop the recording and maybe we